So good afternoon. It's 12:01 here on April 3rd, and this is the Athens City Planning Commission meeting, and I'll call it to order. The first order of business is to establish whether we have a quorum, and in fact, we do have that quorum. All members are present, so all five Planning Commission members are present. And the next item is administration of oaths. So I would ask anyone who would plan on speaking to raise their right hand for me. So I ask you, do you are you comfortable saying that everything you will be speaking to is the truth to the best of your knowledge? Okay. So the first order of business is the disposition of the March 20th meeting minutes. I think they've been sent out electronically, and they are also present, I think, in hard copy in front of each of the members. So do we have any questions about those, any issues with those? And if I hear none, I'd ask that we have a motion to approve them.
Motion to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Are there any questions or concerns about anything there? No. Hearing none, let's vote. All those in favor of accepting the minutes as presented, say aye. Aye. Aye.
And I'll abstain.
And an abstention, and there's no negative. Okay. So the minutes have been passed. So we have two items, case items on the agenda today. The first one is case number 24-02, Grand Park Boulevard and Eden Place rezoning request. May I, anything from either the planner or our
Mr. Chair, we have had some conversations with the appellant, and last meeting there were a couple of questions regarding lighting as an issue, light trespass, as well as discussion about an evergreen hedge or solid fence at the border between the property and the single-family residential to the north. And I think that the appellant has some responses to those comments.
Okay. So,
is that okay?
Well, let me go ahead and ask that the appellate come to and let us know what their thoughts are about those questions asked.
Thank you. Before I get started, whose laptop is this? City's. All right. I will not break it. David Mott, attorney with Malika Gallstone and Cilia on behalf of the applicant. Commission had questions at the last meeting about screening the area from the residential area, about lighting issues also. I believe those were the big two. I want to emphasize that this is in the conceptual phases for my client. There's no developed site plan. There is nothing specific. There's no point in my client spending any money developing those things at this point if the rezoning is not going to go through. Generally, this is a parking area for inventory for the Donwood Hyundai dealership. It will involve paved surface, lighting, striping, all of which would be worked out in much finer detail if the rezoning is approved. As to lighting, Donwood Hyundai is aware that light has a tendency to travel places you don't want it to, and are considering any number of various options to reduce any bleed of lighting over onto the residential district, including shorter light posts, screening the lights on one side so it only casts light away from the residents. There's also a plan to put in a fence. I admit that the fencing specifics are not my strongest area of the city code. At a minimum, the applicant plans to put in, I believe, a chain link fence with plastic inserts 8 feet high to reduce visibility and any light bleeding over into the residential area. And of course, if that is not compliant with the city requirements, whatever goes in will be compliant. Landscaping possibilities are also on the table. Again, nothing has been settled, but all of this is ultimately subject to the full provisions of the city code, and it is the applicant's intention to comply with all those provisions. Does the commission have any immediate questions?
Yes, anybody here in the commission have any questions of Mr. Mott?
I have a question, and this is either for Mr. Mott or Mr. Riggs. The status of the current special use of the right-of-way permit for the lights that were constructed on public property, that is not specifically related to the rezoning request, but does bear on this situation.
I could respond to that. Buckley Group has been hired by the city to do a survey of the right-of-way in East State Street and Grand Park Boulevard to define where the encroachments are into the city's public right-of-way, and they have not completed that survey yet. So as soon as that gets done, then we'll be able to move forward with the applicant's Title 49 special use of the right-of-way permit as soon as that gets done. So that's the holdup, is the survey.
Sure, and a question for Mr. Mott then, in relation to that. So assuming the survey comes back and determines that an encroachment has indeed occurred, and assuming that the city council rejects the special use of the right-of-way permit, is your client prepared to remove the lights that were placed on public property?
I have not had that discussion with my client, but I expect this commission is aware that if the permit is rejected, a court could order those removed. To me, this is white and black. Either that application is approved with modifications, or rejected. If it's rejected, there is no legal basis to leave those lights there. My client is aware of this.
Would you like to?
I'll share with you my questions, my concerns. Andy, I noted from the last meeting and watching it that you commented that the light situation is germane. What is difficult for me to, I think, ferret out in the process is that the comment that you made, Mr. Mott, is that this is conceptual at this point. But number one, the lights have gone in, and dirt has been moved. So that says to me, more than conceptual.
If I may?
Yes.
Those lights are a separate issue.
And I know that. I'm acknowledging that.
On a separate issue, and I believe they were replacement of existing lights.
Okay, thank
certainly
you.
to reduce power usage, and I believe also with the goal to reduce light pollution, although I'm not sure it was effective in that regard.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So my question, and I know they are separate issues, but the question is that the Planning Commission needs to make a decision on whether or not to make a recommendation for a particular kind of zoning. And with those lights, I mean, I know you're telling me it's a separate issue and it comes through City Council, but it does affect how that space will look, and if a recommendation is approved to go in a certain way, it is all intertwined. So I'm a little bit at a quandary, and any kind of insights that you all have as planners in the process about how we might disentangle this, because I know this has come up and this is before us today as a case. My assumption is that you're asking, by putting this on the agenda, you're asking the commission members to make a vote on a recommendation. And I guess my problem is that I'm not quite sure that with that pending, with the lighting right-of-way issue pending, though totally separate, I'm not sure that I feel comfortable with that. But I'll just express that, and I know we've got a lot more room for discussion and comments from people. That's all.
Director Riggs, if we approve the rezoning, is there a way to ask for the things he promised to happen? The screening, the lower light poles, is there a way to tie them together? It's approved upon, these.
So you're suggesting a rezoning approval with conditions?
Yes, to make it.
I don't recall that we've ever done that before. And this would actually go, it's a recommendation of this board. Your recommendation would then go to City Council for review. City Council may be able to place concerns or their concerns in addition to the zoning request. I'm not sure the the planning commission can. It's kind of an up or down. If you want to recommend approval and pass that on with comments, pass that on with comments to city council, or if you deny it, then it would die here.
Okay, thank you for
Well,
clarification.
and if we recommended it with conditions, let's just say that hypothesis, city council could accept it without those conditions
Yes, they could.
as well, too. So,
Yes.
Can I ask another question?
absolutely.
Could city council, or, though you're saying you're not, in theory, you've not heard of planning commissions placing conditions on it, but could city council potentially place conditions on the fence and the quality of the fencing and say chain link fence is not acceptable?
I think I don't think we've done that before, but I think they could.
Okay.
Yeah.
I again just want to note, anything that is in the city code regarding site development will apply. If a chain link fence is inappropriate under the code, it won't be a chain link fence. It'll be something that is appropriate under the code. I also want to suggest that my legal analysis is that the rezoning consideration is about more than just one proposed use. It's a much broader picture about what should the long-term use of this property be, not just what will this specific applicant do with it. What the specific applicant does with it is more, I think, an issue for site review and plan and review of plans that are submitted for permits to develop that site. To me, a rezoning application is more a question of in this case, should this property be a commercial use or a residential use? And in that regard, it seems to me that a lot of questions about this specific aspect or that aspect of a potential plan are better left to city council and perhaps ultimately to review by the code office.
I have another question for the,
You have a question?
I do have a question. For the, both the planner and the director of code. You know, understanding Mr. Mott's question or his statement related to this isn't really about the proposed plan for the current owner, but like plan for the future. One of the things we've discussed in this group is the way that our code reads in our R1 zones does not allow as much density ultimately as we probably need, given the shortage of housing we know we have in Athens and the difficulty it is to build housing in Athens. This is an R2 zone right now, so it's a little denser zone. And we're being asked to change it and get rid of that denser zone and move it to a B3 zone. Could the use that the applicant has said they intend to do, or at least they're thinking about doing, understanding it's conceptual, occur in an R3 zone if this were changed to an R3 rather than a B3?
Could the parking lot work in the R3?
I believe so. Though that is an acceptable use in an R3 as well as a business zone.
Thank you.
And I have a comment on that comment. I concur that a parking lot could occur in an R3 zone. What I see as the weakness to changing the zoning to an R3 is that it is then limited to residential use. If a developer wanted, they could put about 30 apartments on this property. Not being an architect, but just doing an estimate of apartment size versus lot size, maximum coverage, it looks to me that about 30 apartments could go onto this property. That would certainly increase your residential density. On the other hand, that's also a very heavy traffic use. Whereas in an R3 zone, you could not have a law office. You could not have a realty office. Those would be professional offices that are first permitted in a B1, and I think would be distinct from the neighborhood services that are permitted in an R3.
Anything else from the commission? Yes, Mayor.
I find myself stuck, quite honestly, with the comment that you had made earlier that this is concept, because concept
Yes.
could evolve into anything, that's permissible within a B3. But again,
I can be a little more specific. This applicant needs parking, needs inventory space for the dealership. The specific layout, the specific lighting locations, all of the details of what that will look like as a final developed lot haven't been set. That part is conceptual. What it will look like is conceptual. If the rezoning is approved, the very first use of this property will be as inventory parking for Donwood Hyundai.
So if it was changed from R2 to E2, it would not likely go, or as Andy presented, the other option of maybe going to R3 if it went, but if it goes to B, have you ever heard of an instance of a lot going from a B back to an R? That's my question.
I don't recall that being an occurrence here in the city of Athens.
But it could. It could
Could, yes.
potentially happen if Donwood decides.
And if I'm
That's
correct,
no
I believe
longer-
residential uses are permitted in business zones, just under specific circumstances. I believe B2, it has to be.
Not on the first floor.
Not on the first
Not
floor.
on the first floor.
I just have a comment. You know, as we're talking about, you know, should it be, you know, a B zone? Should it remain an R zone? Should it be an R3 zone? I remember distinctly being a city council member back in the day when we were rezoning a lot of this area because there was basically an R2 buffer along there, and then this particular property, the owners at the time, you know, asked that we retain it as an R2 for future development. So it's, you know, this isn't, in some ways, this isn't a new conversation. We were able to preserve it as R2 at the request of the owners. But anyway.
And I find that helpful because I've been scratching my head, how did these 5 lots end up R2? And nothing else around it is. So that background explains it. I also just can tell from a review of the title records that the owner at that time is not the owner now. They sold it off without doing any development of it.
I could be wrong on this, and so I apologize, but I believe it was the Good family that was asking for this to be retained as an R2, because at the time we were rezoning a lot of the R2 along that north portion of East State Street, which was R2 to R1, and that this property, the way the lots were set up, it wouldn't been to their advantage to have it be an R1, and so we decided to keep. We literally just kept that as an R2. But anyway, that's just some history behind it, which is.
And it being the Good family sounds correct. And Good family operates a well-known residential rental business in town. And I don't know if it's necessarily telling, but perhaps suggestive that that family chose not to develop it even after retaining the R2 designation.
Thank you. Are there any questions from anybody else here that are attending the meeting with regard to this particular issue? Please come up and state your name and address.
First. Hi, my name is Heather Laughlin, 8 Grand Park, so I am directly affected by this case. Several questions. Mr. Mott, you said that that was a replacement of existing lights that are causing all this new light. Those are new lights that were put up in the field, and my understanding was they were illegally put up because it hasn't been rezoned yet. And there's a huge difference in lights from the previous lights to the ones that were set further back on the 5 lots.
Well, I think
They might have replaced some that were on the car lot, but they also added additional ones that are creating a whole lot of light.
I'll have to take your word for it. I don't live over there.
Well, I won't say that. Okay. I just have some questions and concerns. I mean, sorry, I get a little nervous. But one concern is if it does become a B3, let's say that the dealership decides to move, they move to another dealership, like what is that going to be? Am I gonna have a McDonald's across the street from my house? That's a real concern. The lighting is a huge concern. It shines in my mom's windows, it shines right in Bill's window. I don't know if anyone had an opportunity to drive up Graham Park, but the lighting it's really bad. And there are businesses at the end of the other streets, and I've driven up and down, and this one is definitely the brightest. I have a concern about fencing. I did have a conversation with Jeff Wood, the owner, and it was a nice conversation, but I think he was just thinking of fencing the back of the property against the houses, which would be 7 Grand Park and I think 7 Eden. I think we would like to see more fencing if this happens all the way around to make it look nicer. Traffic at the bottom of Graham Park, which is where we're at, but with the detailing place and Empire Auto and a car dealership, people are racing up and down there all the time. So we definitely have a concern for safety for children and pedestrians if we add a car lot and more people going in and out closer to our homes. Just one second, thank you. I know that some other neighbors emailed you with concerns, the Lees that live at 7 Grand Park. I also have a couple letters from neighbors, and I am also vice president of the Far East Side Neighborhood Association, and we also wrote a letter. I want to make sure everyone got those, so I don't have to reread them. Okay. Good, I didn't want to.
I might point out that Mr. Swank read that into the record, I believe, that
Okay,
particular
I'm not
letter,
sure if,
too.
did you read Mr. Lee's? Okay, do they? You received
Yeah,
them,
yes,
okay.
yeah.
I think that's it. I think you did read my letter the first time, and I appreciate that.
Okay.
I mean, we've lived there since 1969, and my son will eventually be living there. So there are neighbors that want to raise families there. So I hope we'll take that into consideration. Thank you.
Yes.
The question, I have one question to clarify. B3 allows for a drive-through, is that correct?
So the B3 would allow for drive-throughs, but it's limited to, I think, 200 feet from any residential zone.
Okay.
Is that right? B3?
I'll lean on you for that.
Okay.
There's a distance, I don't remember if it's 200 feet or if it's a different distance, but it's.
I've got it right here.
It's not permitted in a B1 or B2, a drive-through is not permitted in a B1 or
B1 or
B2,
B2.
but it is in a B3, and it has to be, I think, at least 200 feet from any residential zone, not a house, but the edge of the zone. So you
Got
wouldn't be able to put a drive-through at that location without a variance.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yes, your name and address, please.
I'm Kimberly Good Kelly. I have a house at 32 Strathmore, and I also own the Donwood Hyundai building.
Okay.
And I also owned, or my family also owned those 5 lots that we're talking about. Mayor's nodding his head, yes. We've owned those since early 1950s, and we never developed them because we didn't ask the city to do a B3, because a business being that far back on East State, we felt would never succeed. If we put a single-family home in there, we always thought it would never hold its value, even a duplex, because who wants to open their front door and have a body shop staring at them on the front door and a body shop out the back door and a dealership in their side yard? It's not conducive to a family living environment. You know, it's like building a house in an industrial park. It doesn't work. So I really think a parking lot is the best use for these lots. That whole neighborhood from Strathmore to Eden is all B3 butting up against R1. And I don't see why these 5 lots should really be any different. You know, that's, if anyone has any questions about the history of the lots, that's why it was never developed. And in fact, the neighbors used those lots to let their dogs relieve themselves and didn't clean up the mess. So that's what the lots were used for 60 years. So, but I think this is the best use for the lots. I mean, Donwood has put a lot of money into that building. He's put millions of dollars into the building. He has an option for over a 20-year lease. He's going to be there for a long time. It's not like he's doing this and leaving. So it will be a dealership for a long time, so.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who'd like to speak to this? Yes. Councilman Swank.
Alan Swank, 40 Townsend, 4th Ward City Councilman. If this is passed on from the Planning Commission, the committee it would go to on City Council is the Planning and Development Committee, unless the President of Council considers this a measure that should be handled by the Committee of the Whole. My guess is it'll be the former and not the latter. As the chair of the Planning and Development Committee, I'm very uncomfortable bringing a recommendation of a B3 zone forward for a variety of reasons. Our attorney today told us that this is more about the long-term use, and that the long-term use is the driving force of this. What will the future look like? Yes, today the immediate use is for a parking lot, and Ms. Good said perhaps that is the best use of it. I hate to give up the green space, but perhaps a parking lot is the best use. But Ryan, if you could enable me here, I would like to share with you what I fear could happen if this becomes a B3. The slides you are about to see are taken from the middle of Avon Place, 1 block west of Graham Park. This is a B3 zone. This is on the east side of Avon, and the back, Mr. Bill Blair, correct me if I'm wrong. I believe that's your house. And if it's not yours, it's Heather's. Imagine looking out Mr. Blair's back door and seeing this. But this is a B3 zone. Oops, went the wrong way, sorry. You can see this from Mr. Blair's house. Industrial solvents and storage. Legal, but clearly visible from an R1 zone. A fence. This is Avon again. That is 7 Avon. Does that fence really shield anything from the B3 zone? Closer look of the SS Minnow. I can almost see Gilligan's sitting in there. And a truck that's going nowhere today, tomorrow, or the next day. There's not even an engine in that truck. But again, a B3 zone. And then we go across the street. Now I'm looking west on Avon. This is behind what we used to call a head shop. Today they call it a vape shop. But if you look closely behind that tractor trailer rig, there is a modular trailer. I don't know if anybody's living in it or not. I was reluctant to go any farther or go on the property to take the pictures. You see the trailer again. And it looks like it has some of the wrapping around it that they put around trailers that we often see on the interstate highway, with a large vehicle, warning vehicle in front, and a large vehicle, warning vehicle behind. And that same parking lot. And the house at 6 Avon. And a chain link fence with some vegetation starting to grow. If this is truly about what the future holds, and we award this B3, a B3 designation, do we really want this possibility? We used to have a magnet on the refrigerator of our house, and the magnet simply said, people spend 90% of their time worrying about things that will never happen. One could say, Alan, you're in that 90%. But who would have thought when I lived on 19 Avon from 1983 to 1996 that the end of my street would look like this, and what the end of the people who live there street looks like today. I think Mr. Stone's suggestion, or I'm not sure of the suggestion, floating the idea, I don't want to put words into his mouth, but floating the idea of making this an R3 zone, which would allow for the parking lot, which is the immediate need of Donwood Hyundai, to be fulfilled. I think that if you're going to put up the parking lot, this would be the way to do it. Again, Don Wood is a tenant. He has a lease. But he was also a tenant at the Ford dealership on the other side of Eden. And that Ford dealership moved to the edge of town, out by Holzer. Who's to say the same thing couldn't happen here? And if it's a B3, who knows what's going to come in afterwards? Two other things. If you were on Avon, or excuse me, if you were on Grand Park, southbound towards the City Rec Center, and you pull up to the designated white line where a car is supposed to stop before moving on to another highway, and I look to the left, you can see the aforementioned lights that were placed without permission. But more importantly, you can see vehicles that we're going to find out when we get the survey, probably parked in the city right-of-way. I have visited with this dealership on more than one occasion and personally asked them two things. One, back the vehicles up at least to the light post line. And secondly, in the first three spots, the ones closest to us, do not put high-profile vehicles such as SUVs. Because as you can see, if I want to make a left or a right onto East State Street, I can't see the traffic, the oncoming traffic in the right-hand lane. It is a safety hazard. To be able to see the oncoming traffic in the right-hand lane, I have to pull up. And when I took this picture, you know where I was sitting? Right in the middle of the pedestrian and bicycle crosswalk. And on more than one occasion, to safely get onto East State Street, I have had to do that only to see a young kid on a bicycle barreling down East State Street on the sidewalk, as kids will do, and have to swing around me, or I had to back up quickly if I could. Supposedly, if this extra parking lot is put in, there will no longer be a need for those cars in the right-of-way. But I've been told by other dealers, that's hogwash. Car dealers locate on busy streets and park their cars as close to the street as possible so that people driving by can see them. It's a marketing technique that works. I have no reason to believe that those cars will disappear if we get this parking lot. So I think it would be disingenuous for those proposing the parking lot to say this is going to happen. And if you do grant the parking lot, and hopefully you do under an R3 designation, that we get these cars out of the right-of-way for the safety of the citizens of Athens, both those pulling out and those traveling westbound on State Street. Any questions?
I have none. Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else like to?
Oh, go ahead, see if there's anybody else that wants to.
Again, state your name and address.
I'm Rob Delich. I live on Morris Avenue here in the city. Speaking just for myself, I also like the suggestion that Director Stone provided of an R3 designation for this. I think that seems to make a lot of sense just with the discussion we've had and the insights about that. And Alan Swank and I agree on something for once. That's interesting. So I think it sounds like a good idea, because I do think that the long-term use of the property is something we should be considering. And an R3 designation allows for the possibility of apartments, which seems like that would be a compatible use with this location in the future potentially. And to convert it to B3 would eliminate that as a serious option. Does it eliminate it as an option period? It sounds like maybe somebody could have put apartments in a B3 zone, but I don't know if that's at all likely. If it's zoned for an R3, we're much more likely to get what we want there, I think, in the future. So I think that's a good suggestion. Thank you.
Sure. And then I believe, Mr. Mott, you'd like to say something afterward about some of the
I
comments?
was
or-
going to wait until everyone else is done.
Yeah,
And then just address additional concerns all at once.
Okay.
One of the main concerns, which I forgot, I would like to see, I think the intent is to put it right up to the property line, so like this is 7 Grand Park, the fence and the cars would be here. If we could possibly have 20 or 25 feet back, so it's not directly up against the Lee's house, it's not directly across from my house or Bill's. If maybe we could do that. And I know that you said that there's extra inventory, but there's hardly anything parked on the Donwood Ford lot. So maybe if there was a case where they had extra cars, maybe some of them could temporarily be parked there. So, thank you.
I think there's a side yard setback requirement, but and I'm not sure what that is, but
10 feet, I think.
10 feet or something like that. So it wouldn't be right against the property line unless they got a variance, I guess, to do that.
Is that for a building or parking lot would apply to that setback?
Oh, that's a good point.
That's what,
Is there a parking lot setback?
Not for parking or for fencing that's less than 6 feet in height. So you could put it right on the property line.
Can you request that or?
That would come after the zoning request when they come in for a zoning permit for the parking lot. And then I don't have any provisions to ask that because that's what's allowed by code.
Okay, so it's planning, city council, zoning.
Yes, well, if that gets
Okay.
approved, then they would come for a zoning permit,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
thank
And that would be, the setbacks would be the same for an R3 or a business zone. For the parking lot, in an R3, you can go right to the property line. In an R3, you can put a fence right on the property line that's 6 feet or less.
So is there anybody else that'd like to speak to this? If not, I'll allow Mr. Mott to come up.
Yeah, that's a weird rules, our structures.
That's, you know, I was all on board with this R3 and parking lot, but that 6 foot or less is a great concern. I mean, I can see over it. In most houses, first floor window. I mean, that's, yeah. What about the vegetation part, I guess, in addition to the fence? Can that be stipulated somehow?
Again, you know, we're talking about zoning, request for a zoning change. This is actually, goes back to the zoning permit that's different from the zoning change. So I don't know how you do that because the zoning is for all zones, not the specific one.
Exactly.
I
But that would be a
don't know how you do
concern if
that,
it's only
yeah.
a 6 foot high fence. You saw in the slides I showed
Right.
what you can see.
And Mr. Mott had talked about an 8-foot fence,
Yeah.
but
And then I guess the other question I have related to this, and this is hypothetical, this parking lot, would it be limited to new and used cars? Or could it also be used for cars in disrepair, much like that truck we saw? Just throwing out all the possibilities.
well, certainly, and,
Yeah.
you know, when I think about a parking lot, I generally think, particularly at a dealership, I think of a paved parking lot, but I don't know that it has to be paved. It could be gravel, you know, but at any rate, I don't. And that would be something that Mr. Riggs would have to
Right.
deal
Yeah,
with.
parking lots required to be paved,
Are they
either concrete
required
or
to be paved?
asphalt.
But the pictures he showed had lots that were not paved, I guess, so.
Which is something, this will be 3 times in a month, I'm sure Mr. Delac and I would agree on. We throw another Joni Mitchell paved parking lot. The effects of groundwater retention and runoff and puddling and so on and so forth. So this could be a pretty big project if we're putting down a Joe Burrow-sized football field, and that's essentially what this is, a football-sized parking lot, football field-sized parking lot. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Mott, I think.
All right, hello again. The advantage to going at the very end is other people say things that then mean I don't have to say as much. Ms. Laughlin commented on potential for traffic. There's no anticipated increase in traffic from this. This is not going to be like a publicly available parking lot with people coming and going. This is for inventory storage. The business at Donwood Hyundai is not expected to increase just because they have additional inventory. It would be the same amount of customers coming and going as there is now. So I don't think there would be a real increase in traffic. While I'm thinking about it, as to Councilmember Swank's concern about runoff and drainage, I believe there are city code provisions addressing all of that, and all of those would have to be complied with. And again, as to any potential landscaping, shade tree commission, all of that would apply. I did want to note that I believe Councilmember Swank might be blurring the issues a little bit. I'm not sure if it's intentional or accidental. He had photos of those are B3, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Those photos are clearly in violation of existing code. That is not a zoning issue, that's an enforcement issue, and it's one that I actually believe Councilmember Swank, sitting on City Council, is in a position to begin initiatives about. Just because one neighbor ignores the code and has not immediately been called on it, or is perhaps in the process of being called on it, does not mean that this commission should expect everyone else in that zone is going to do the same thing. All up and down East State Street, Zone B3, and to my knowledge, there are only a couple of properties that have issues similar to the ones in the photos Mr. Swank showed. Did you want to go again?
No.
Oh, okay.
Thank
Any
you.
further questions from the commission?
Anybody? No? Hearing, oh, yes.
I have a question of the code director.
Oh, okay.
Two questions. One, do you see any negative in your analysis of this long-term, the vision of potentially changing this to an R3?
Disadvantages? I don't see any.
Okay. Number two is a procedural question that I'm not sure to whom to direct this, probably you as chair.
Okay,
Because the current recommendation is not for an R3.
correct.
And so would it be that the motion has to go through and fail and you introduce a new one, or you just amend? If that was the consideration that planning commission members wanted to do, to consider amending it to an R3.
I guess I'll look to.
Sure,
city officials.
I don't know that we would need to do that. I mean, the applicant asked for a B3. What we're doing is just voting on a recommendation, so I mean, we could recommend
should change it.
an M if we wanted to.
Like we did in Elliott Street.
Right, we wouldn't have
Got
to
it.
fail and
Okay.
then have the applicant re-ask, because that you would be telling
would
the
seem to
applicant to ask something again that maybe they aren't asking for. We're recommending something, so I think we could, whatever someone made a motion to do.
Okay.
And then if we recommended an R3 and we proposed an R3, recommended it to city council could accept it or not, and they could actually then at that time do a B3, even if they felt that was appropriate.
I think they have to have a supermajority to go
Supermajority
against the
to do
recommendation of the planning commission, but I think,
Okay.
I don't know that entirely for sure, but I know that there is an extra step if city council is not going to take the recommendation of planning commission. I'd have to validate that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Mayor Patterson.
You know, I feel like we're talking right over the representative to Don Wood, who's standing right before us. Let me ask the
ahead,
simple
I'm not bothered
question.
at all.
Let me ask the simple question, that being, would Don Wood be amenable to it being R3 versus B3?
Don Wood has a strong preference for a B3. I think the primary reason is because there's a difference in permissible lot coverage. I believe an R3 is limited to 60% lot coverage. A B3, I don't believe, has that limitation. This is more of a long-term consideration than an immediate one. Don Wood is not even certain if they are going to pave the entire thing immediately. In fact, they anticipate they wouldn't. But if they are limited to 60%, it is entirely possible that they again reach a place where they have outgrown the size of that specific location. And if they can't grow anymore there, what does the business do when it has to grow and it can't where it is, they have to relocate.
Sorry, I have a question. Sorry. On this. And maybe Director Riggs, you can clarify, or Mr. Mott. Who is the applicant? Is the applicant the tenant, or is the applicant the property owner?
The applicant is a property owner. The property owner is Grand Town Eden LLC, which is under common ownership with Donwood Hyundai, which is the tenant of the parcel against East State Street.
I still don't understand.
Explain that to me like I'm a 5-year-old. All right.
The Donwood family owns the dealership, but they rent that specific space. They own a different company that owns these parcels. So these parcels are owned by the Donwood family, even though they don't own the business location. But as Ms. Kelly said, they have, what was it, 20-year? They have a 20-year lease, so they don't have plans to go anywhere immediately. And the additional space allows them to remain where they are.
But did I hear Ms. Good say that she owns the land?
Her family company owns the land up against East State Street. These 5 parcels that sit back are owned by the Woods.
Got it, thank you. Now I understand, okay.
Gotcha.
One other thing I would like to comment, it would seem as though one of the concerns was all the traffic, and I concur, Mr. Mott, with you that this probably doesn't increase or decrease traffic, at least due to the Hyundai business. But would it not be possible to seek from the city speed bumps to, immediately as you get to the residential area to slow traffic down going into the neighborhood or not? I don't know. Just a question. I know I see speed bumps in different locations around the community.
I think you'd want the residents to request that, because.
I'm not saying, no, I'm not saying we do anything with that. I'm not saying we do any, but I'm just saying that to some of the people here that have raised that issue, that might, there is another way maybe to solve that problem.
For sure.
That's a really wide street. Mr. Chair, I have a question.
Yes.
This is a question on procedure for the Board of Zoning Appeals. Can the lot coverage requirement be granted a variance under the BZA?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I would just note that is an entirely separate process, as I'm sure you're all well aware.
Been doing this a long time, Mr.
I
Mott,
know,
thank you.
I know.
So
Go
one
ahead.
other question. So this would be coming through, once again, it's a matter of timing. So we're also looking at code and some revisions to the percentage of lot allowances. And we're talking about reducing that potentially, so that they could request, if meanwhile our zoning code changes go through, that would make sense. I know it's a separate process, but it would then make sense. The argument could be made, if it is, that you want to be current or applying for what the new regulations are, because you'd probably be grandfathered in.
So if the new regulations are more permissive, my understanding is that the property owner would immediately be able to take advantage of those with no special process needed.
Correct.
Correct, yeah, true.
And of course, recommendations to increase the permitted lot coverage are simply recommendations until they've been approved and are effective. One of the things about lawyers is we tend to be risk averse and we don't like uncertainty. So as a general rule, I never plan on a change happening.
Okay, Commission, I think we've labored on this a bit. What's your pleasure here? They're seeking a rezoning to B3. What's the pleasure? Do I have a motion of any kind, or do we have any maybe discussion amongst ourselves here, or what's the pleasure of the board, Commissioner?
I'm good. I'm going to propose my vote.
Dude, make a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the B3.
Is there a second? So this fails because there is no second.
Could I
I'd
make
be
a
happy to.
Okay.
Could I make a motion to change the designation and make a recommendation for R3?
I second.
Okay. So we have a recommendation for an R3 and a second. Is there any discussion that we want to have here before we vote? Okay. Hearing no discussion, so all those in favor of changing the designation for this Grand Park Eden Place rezoning, the lots there, I guess it's 5 Grand Park to an R3, all those in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? So it's passed. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is case 24-03, changes to the Athens code, subdivisions and minimal allowable lot sizes. I'll ask Mr. Riggs or the planner, Ms. Jennings, to open the discussion on that.
Mr. Chair, I'll start. Thank you. I've had, I think in the last 30 days, 18 applications for lot splits, both in the city and outside of the city. So we seem to be getting a lot of them, and this would really help me to be able to manage those subdivisions, to be able to look at these proposed changes. We wanted to do a couple of things. One is to look at changing the code for for proposed lots that are more than 5 acres in size. This does meet the Ohio Revised Code regulations. I've also been in contact with the County Health Department, and I believe Ms. Jennings has been in contact with the county planner regarding these changes that we're going to make, because it does affect the county as well as the health department. They seem to be on board with these recommended changes. It does meet the city's or the state of Ohio Revised Code rules and regulations. And the other piece here would be the creation of an access easement with 2 or more lots. We seem to see a lot of access easements across one lot that automatically kicks in by our regulations, automatically kicks in a major subdivision that would need to go to Planning Commission and then to City Council. This would significantly reduce the amount of those really minor subdivisions that have to go the major subdivision route because of an easement across the property. In addition, did you want to talk about that? In addition, we wanted to maybe suggest changes to Title 21, Table 1, instead of the city, in-city regulations, we could just reference Title 23, Table A. I think we'd prefer to do that rather than have this in 2 places. It's really hard to keep those from having errors in them if you've got the same regulations in 2 different places. So we wanted to suggest that, and then
Yeah, we could, regarding the 2 tables, both in Title 21 and Title 23, we could come back in 2 weeks with the Planning Commission to show you the official language that we would want to move forward. I would also like to look at the bulk controls and just make sure that those numbers make sense for our community, and look at standards across other communities that are comparable, and just make sure we're doing best practices with how we're moving forward with those changes to the bulk controls. So if you're okay with kind of separating those 2 items and talking about the subdivision items that David just reviewed with you today, and then kind of waiting to talk about the 2 tables until our next meeting, which is April 17th. Yes.
So we would vote on the changes today and then receive the bulk tables at the next meeting and vote on those. So that's what we're talking about doing.
Yeah.
you could if you like, or you could table the whole thing until we've got all the tables, all those tables together. Sorry, table, but at your pleasure.
Okay. And it doesn't, either way works for you folks.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. What do people think? I kind
You
of
look-
tend, go ahead.
And you're looking to make sure that we've cut it enough, right? I know you're making drastic cuts, but should they be further based off what your research shows?
Yeah, and I
Based
just
off our
want to make sure the
citizens.
numbers make sense.
Good.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, yes.
I mean, I would think that maybe sometimes you try and change something, you change it, and you go, oops, we got to go back because you look at the table. Whereas you say there's something, additional research that you might find.
So
Just
I'm
hold.
consistent, I feel consistent with that. I would opt to just table it for another 2 weeks if it doesn't appear to be an issue for the code officer or the planners. I don't think so, the planners, so, okay. Everybody feel that way? Let's go ahead.
Just to save discussion in 2 weeks, then,
Yes.
you know, I don't know that you would have to rehash yet again, the language changes in Title 21, so in 2 weeks, we'll just talk about the tables, you know, and then we'll vote on the whole thing together. Okay. Just to save everybody's time,
Makes sense.
rather
Thank
than
you.
if we're not gonna pass it now.
And when you come back with the tables, I think I emailed you a question this morning about the 5/12,
Yep.
just so I better understand
Yep.
that when you come back with
We
a
want to
discussion on
make,
that.
we want to make some changes to that, so.
Okay.
Okay, so then, that case will be tabled until, it's for 2 weeks until the 17th. Right, yes. So now we have a communication here, a Title 41 issue regarding review of the Southeast Beverage Warehouse addition.
I need to excuse myself because this is our case. Communication.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is we haven't had one in a while. This is a Title 41 site plan review for a great business there in the western part of the city, the beverage warehouse, Southeast Beverage. We did receive the plans. I've sent those to staff for comments. Did not receive any comments, or there were no comments at this time from police, fire, engineering and building, planning. And my only comment was that we would like to see the photometrics, the light plan to check about light trespass. And we also didn't have at that time a landscaping plan. I have received those since, and I haven't had a chance to review either of those plans, and I don't think you have them in your packet. So the only real issue we see with this at this time is the site isn't really set up to plant the number of trees that are required by our landscaping plan, our Title 37 landscaping. We have in the past varied from the strict requirements of that code in a couple of ways to allow the banking of shade trees, or we did in the case of Menards, come to an agreement with the developer that they could provide trees in the future. I know there probably should be some discussion on that. The rest of the plan from a zoning and development standpoint seems fine to us at this time. We'll do some more review, but we don't see any issues with it at this time.
Yes, Mayor.
I have a question, and I've not been on site. I need to go down there and look at the site. Currently, is it a paved area?
Yeah, it's a parking area right now, so the amount of impervious area isn't necessarily going to change very much. I think there's a little bit of additional paving that's going in, but the impervious really won't change much on this site.
And therefore, there currently are no trees on this paved area.
It's mostly pavement. There's not a lot of spots for trees, yeah.
And instead, there's going to be a structure that's built on this. I'm just going to come out and say it. I kind of have an issue when it comes to, a shade tree requirement on something that currently exists as a concrete parking lot that will have a structure on it. And this is a shade tree issue, and I completely understand, but we're the planning commission. And so I just want to be on record as making that clear with this particular.
The code in the landscape code does not separate existing pavement from proposed pavement. It looks at everything together.
Yeah. And this is, just again, as a point of clarification, this is an industrial park.
It's an M zone, yes.
It is an M site, so, okay.
I had a question, so I'm assuming that this is, the first page here is the existing, where it shows where the proposed addition is going in, where there's a number of trucks parking.
Yes.
What happens with the trucks? Are they displaced somewhere which would create some?
That would be a question for the appellant.
Okay, okay. Okay, yes.
And a question about the percentage, just ballpark, the percentage increase. Is this like I don't know, I'm just looking, is this a 30% increase in the square footage, and then also the percentage of the actual lot that it covers? I'm assuming it's all within our regulations.
Yes, yeah, it is. I don't know, I don't have those numbers in front of me,
Okay,
and I don't think they're on the plans either.
okay,
We can ask for that information.
okay.
I don't see it.
Are you the rep? Okay,
My name is Mark Welch. I'm with Pickering Associates who created the drawings that you guys are looking at.
okay,
I could probably answer a couple of your questions if you'd like.
sure, please do.
So the parking question that somebody asked about, currently a good portion of that concrete area is used for some of the trailer storage. That will still happen to the south of this building. They'll still be using that for loading docks and trailer storage partially. And then they also have other property that they are planning to use for other trailer storage at a future date. So the trailer storage is being taken care of.
Is this other storage there at the site?
Same in the same
Okay,
industrial park.
and will it require upgrading to be able to accommodate those trailers?
Some minor upgrades, but nothing, I don't believe anything major.
So we're not adding a lot more impervious surface or anything like that?
No, and if they do that, that'll be something separate. It won't be anything with this specific project. So this specific project is really just what you see on the drawings. As far as the percentage of impervious area question, that's on drawing C102, I believe. I misspoke, sorry. Drawing C104. We're going from a pre-construction condition of 72% impervious area on that, because it is primarily a concrete pad for parking, and a post condition of 74, so a 2%
Okay.
increase in impervious area.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions just from a design standpoint?
Anybody else? Any other information we need?
I don't know, a design question, I got a use question, or just a general thing. Is there a associated, and while this is kind of outside of the purview of the Title 41 process, is there a jobs component or a increased economic output component of this particular project that we should be aware of?
I think Austin would have to answer. I mean, I can speak if you'd like me to. I don't know that we have the expertise to answer that question. I mean, only Austin and the management of that company can answer that.
Sure.
I think there is the potential for some more jobs there, but I wouldn't know how many. I mean, certainly increasing his capacity to do business. So if you're increasing your capacity to do business, I would think that you have capacity to hire more people.
Good, thank you.
Yes.
I don't know if you know the answer to this. I know I certainly don't. At this point of order, since this property and this business is owned by an individual who's a commissioner on the planning commission, can that individual come before this body and speak on his own behalf?
I would think
While
so,
he's
yeah.
recusing, he's certainly not at the dais.
Yeah, we have a history of that in Board of Zoning Appeals, where they, the board member stepped down and could speak on about his own project, so.
Well, to help streamline this, I would like,
Ask
Scott,
Austin.
could you have Austin come in here, because this is pertinent to your question.
Right.
I too want to find out what this would look like from an economic development, employment standpoint.
While you're fetching him, could I ask one quick question? How many trees would the code require be put in?
I only estimated, but it looked like about 120 trees.
Okay, small forest, and Mr. Stone, you beat me to the punch on the economic development. Thank you.
I'll just make an aside comment about shade trees. And Mayor, I respectfully disagree with you, Mayor Patterson. Because I think shade tree considerations for the longer-term development of a city are very important. So whether something, and if you begin to give instances of, well, this is impervious surface, so we grant, accommodations because of that, or a reduction in the number of trees required, I think every community in the world needs more trees. So the more we can do to encourage that and encourage just a flat line until we're ready to totally revise shade tree commission regulations.
Can I add to that?
Sure.
While we're talking about this, Rob Delich, Morris Avenue here in the city, just speaking for myself again. I wanted to say something about the shade tree requirements here too. I think it's a reasonable thing, maybe not to require the full number, potentially negotiate something with the company, maybe. But I think, are we at the point where we've used up the Menards tree bank that we had? They still have some.
Lots.
But that has been a huge benefit. There's been a lot of trees planted in the city that were provided through that. I think adding to the tree bank is a great idea, and I think that we should do that. But again, some flexibility with the business might make some sense, I think. So.
Mayor?
I appreciate all the comments about the shade trees, so don't hear me as hating trees. That's not where I'm coming from at all. It was over 370 some trees that was required for the Menard site, if I'm not mistaken. It was a very large number of trees. Mr. Chair,
So
don't mean to
we
speak.
asked you to come back in, Austin, just so that you might be able to speak to some questions we had as the owner. So I think.
Promise to tell the truth.
There you go. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, go ahead,
Sure.
Mr. Stone.
Right, I asked, just as for the applicant, this improvement, and while, Title 41, we're not worried about this as a planning commission, as a city, we are always trying to promote economic development. Can you speak to either any job creation or increased economic output from this improvement?
Yeah, we had a significant event last year that increased our sales, our market share. So we added 7 employees. And so those employees have already been added. We have just been out of space. And so, if that answers your question. So yes, the business increased, and we've just been running really tight for 4 or 5 years, frankly.
Sure.
Would you, when you build the addition, I guess part of the in my mind, I was thinking, will that create any additional jobs? Now, I'm appreciative of the fact that as a community member that you've already added 7. Will there be any additional because of the increased space, or pretty much just give you the elbow room you need to do what you want to do?
Exactly. It'll give us the elbow room to do what we need to do.
Okay.
So it'll be all inventory storage at the end of the day. And so right now we're just having to order very tight days on hand, and we'll be able to extend that. So.
Mayor?
Since we're talking economic development, I have a couple questions. Number one, if authorized or approved, how long would it take for this addition to be completed?
We're hoping by July 4th.
Of this year?
Mm-hmm. It's a metal.
So it's a pretty rapid build.
It's a metal building. It's a prefab building, and that's the timeline we're holding our builder to.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
But no, if approved, then that we are looking to move fairly quickly. Yes.
And do you already have a contractor involved? And I'm going to ask that question. Is it a local contractor or a state of Ohio contractor?
Happy to speak on
Yeah, I'll let him speak on his behalf.
I'm sorry. Hello, my name is John Anderson. I'm the general manager for Mark Mondo Building and Excavating in Marietta, Ohio. We've been referred to Austin as a potential builder, and we got into a competitive bidding situation with some other contractors, and we've established a good relationship. Our timeline now is we go through this permitting process and commission that our Our plan is to start foundations as quickly as we can, but we know we have some, hurdles to jump through. But we do have a building scheduled to deliver April 29th of this month, so we're ready to go. We just need to get everything in place to do it. It's kind of been a fluid working process with the owner and the builder and the design team as a design build project, because we're trying to do cost saving measures and layout measures and trying to maximize the investment for their productivity and trying to save money where we can and make it the most beneficial to them as we can. We want to be good stewards of their funding and take care of them as a contractor. So we have done work in Athens before. We're not a regular in your town, but we'd like to certainly be here more often. I'm a young man who grew up in Pomeroy, Ohio, and I have family here. I've had family here, so I'm very familiar with the area. My wife is an employee in the city of Athens, so we have roots here too. So.
Thank you very much.
Does,
Thank you.
is the building going to look pretty much the same? The addition, will that look the same?
Yes.
And again, I don't think that's our purview here, but I just was curious.
It'll look
about that.
similar to the building on the right side as a
Okay.
metal building. So it'll match the right side of the building as the left.
Any other questions?
My ignorance in reading the maps. What's the ballpark, just the addition size? I mean, I see 27 by,
It's 26,000 square feet. We're currently about 50,000 square feet of warehouse space.
Okay.
So it's adding 50,000 square feet. And that, honestly, forgive me, the back lot looks pretty messy. We are getting rid of 4 different units that we don't need because we will have the storage inside. Some of these draft trailers will be parked inside as well. So it'll really clean up this lot where, and we'll be able to fit all these trucks consolidated at the bottom. So we won't need that off-site parking. We did buy a lot in case we needed additional parking, but we will not need to use that for parking at this point.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Okay, so,
One other thing.
yes.
I did bring a photometric if you folks needed it. I don't know if it was entered into the record, but I do have full size, and those numbers are hard to see if you're looking at it on a small.
little sheet.
give it to me.
If you'd like to have them, I did bring 5 copies for the commission if you'd like to have them.
John, just give it to Megan. She'll tell us whether or not the light trespass works.
I have one, I promise, I have one last question. Is it for the contractor, have you ever done a green roof?
Have I ever done a green roof? I did the basis for a green roof. I think the Strecker Cancer Center in Belpre has an area on that walkout platform for patients where they're getting treatment, that there's a section of green roof on top of it. It has a drainage system and some fairly intricate ways that gets water to it and off of it and all that. But I've never actually built one, but I've done some of the front end part of it to get a green roof built. I'm familiar with what they do, but no, I've not done one from start to finish. So no.
Yeah, not required, I'm just, again, food for thought as I'm thinking this through.
Mark probably has done the design of quite a few, I would think. So he may be able to answer.
Okay, that's fine.
Where would you want there?
So next, in 2 weeks, we'll have this Title 41 then on the agenda as a case. Thank you. So our code enforcement director has scooted, so I'm assuming, I don't know if anybody has any kind of a report on his behalf, but if not, Ms. Jennings, it's your floor.
I'll say, Ms. Nisley, you had emailed before the meeting asking about the ridges, and I know that David is still working on getting all of those from OU, so that's still kind of a pending thing that we have yet to fully review. From me, though, I don't have anything additional to report.
Yes.
One aside, not to get us involved in the conversation, but just 2 things that have come up today. One has been paved impermeable surfaces versus permeable surfaces and how our code looks on that. And wanting to take a look at the code as we begin to encourage more building. And then also the mayor's comment on the green roofs. Is there anything we could be building into our code long-term that would encourage that? So just, those are just asides.
Thank you. Good comments. So is there anybody else here that wants to speak to anything that was not discussed? Any project or item that was not discussed? No. See, all the heads shaking no, or most of them. Okay, so then, any other announcements? I would like to ask one quick question about it. Well, a question, I don't know how, if the response will be more, but, and maybe with Mr. Riggs, it will need to wait till in 2 weeks. But I was curious about how the project on East State Street with the Chipotle Starbucks is coming. A significant amount of earthwork going on there. Is that, and maybe Mr. Stone, you would have some insight there. Is that going well there? The engineer's here.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah, that might be a better question for him. As an outside observer, not having talked to anyone, I can see H-pilings going into the ground, which are
Yes.
expensive. So
Yeah.
somebody is paying for those, which
Right.
means it's progressing, but if the engineer would want to speak to that, that'd be great.
Yeah. I did know that.
And I won't ask if there's a green roof involved, so.
Project is moving along. All the piling is installed. The concrete lagging panels are currently being installed. If you drive by there today, you'll see several of those sticking out of the ground already. The goal is to have the rest of the concrete lagging complete around the end of next week. And that will make the walls substantially complete at that point.
Okay.
The two businesses that are planned for that property are under contract with construction companies to get that work started as well. The Chipotle will be first and Starbucks will fall right after that.
Okay.
So things are definitely.
Great. Were you at the site today? all?
Not yet. I plan to stop
Okay.
by there after.
We had so much rain last night. I just wondered how that
Yeah, I
figured
didn't get a call, so that makes me feel good. Normally if there's something bad, I get
Yeah,
a call, so
yeah.
I didn't get a call, so I
Okay,
think that's good.
Thank you. Yes.
Just real quickly, since you said both Chipotle and Starbucks, there's contractors that are under contract for those. Any timeline that you're aware of in terms of potential completion of either Chipotle first and Starbucks second?
Starbucks is definitely an open for next year. Chipotle is possible will open this year.
Okay.
I don't want to be held to that, but it's feasible. Yeah.
Sorry to put you on the spot. Appreciate it. Appreciate the information.
So, is there anything else? So our next meeting is in 2 weeks, April 17th, right here at noon. And I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded, okay. All in favor, say aye.
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 We are adjourned. Thank you.